Hey everyone, in today's video we're going to dive into how to carve a photograph, so any photograph that you might have, onto a piece of wood. But before we dive into that, you might have noticed something a little different for those of you that follow along. Something down here is missing. That's right, I moved the CNC router. So let me kind of show you what I've done. I've made a few changes in the shop to accommodate it. So first off, as you can see, I took the machine out and I moved around the sander that I had and from its base, and I just took them apart, took the wheels off and put it underneath so that now I have a cabinet and storage space for the sander, which I hardly use, but it's become a good place for it. So now let me show you what I did with the machine. All right, so here it is, the new CNC router table. I've decided to do a lot more CNC work, so I needed to get the machine up off the floor and to a much more comfortable height. I also have some changes coming to the machine in the near future, and that would not work underneath the table. I'll get into that later on in other videos as well, but for the time being, I've gone away and removed my mobile building cart that I had. I had to get rid of that for space. And whatever was in there, I decided to just put in the lower level of this table, which I use for storage. And this just worked out great. It's much more comfortable to work on, and I can really focus on what I'm doing rather than crouching, down on the floor. I will show you, I have two drawers on it that I use. One side is for all of the tools. So I have them in a nice organized place to get to. And the other side, I made a custom router, bit storage area. Everything's really easy to access and get to. I really like how it turned out. Everything's convenient right at your fingertips. Have a laptop set up right there. I put all of the control devices in the back, so it's really easy to get to. The control box, the cooler, the VFD. So everything just turns on, a couple of switches, and yeah, so it's pretty cool. So I just wanted to go through this real quick, only because you're going to be seeing it, and I didn't want anybody to wonder, hey, what happened? Why is it under the table anymore? So that's it. I hope you guys like the new setup. Now let's dive into carving a photograph onto a piece of wood. Okay, everyone, so I'm in Vectric Aspire. That's what I use as my design software. And the first step in the process is to establish the size of the board that you're going to be using. So we come up here, set job dimensions. Again, I've already gone ahead and done this. I'm just going to go through it with you. It is a single-sided job type. For my particular project, my board is 18¼ inches wide by 10¼ inches high, or as they call it, long. Its thickness is just over 5/8 of an inch, and we're going to be using, for our Z0 position, the material surface. For my XY datum position, I like to use the front left corner, and I happen to be using maple, so in my material settings, I have it set for maple. It helps to visualize it later. Okay, so that's all set. Once you have that done, then you need to go in and create a rectangle all the way around your perimeter of your workpiece. I've done that already, so mine is 18¼ by 10¼ When you create that, you will get a nice boundary going all the way around your board. Then I also like to go in and under the modeling tools, I like to create a flat shape, which when you click on it, you just set the base height, or what is the actual thickness of your board. And again, mine is just over 5/8. So I just type in 11/16, hit equal sign, and it automatically creates it for me, so that when you go into the 3D view, as you can see here, you get your board exactly as you have it. All right. So now once you have that, it's really pretty easy. You just go up here and you import a bitmap or a vector from your files, and wherever you have your photograph stored, for mine it happens to be under downloads, and I'm going to upload that one. Okay, so it automatically brings it up, and now this photograph happens to be 16 by 9, which is what I want. My board is also 16 by 9. And in case you're wondering what that works out to, it's basically a 1.78 ratio to 1. So if you're trying to figure out like what size your board should be, it's 1.78 to 1. And that will help you size things. You can also resize this picture, which is what I'm going to do right now. It is selected, so I'm going to go over here to set selected object size. And right now it's occupying the entire surface of the board, and I don't want that. I want to leave just slightly a bit of a border going around. So I'm going to keep it linked so that it changes it automatically and keeps it in a 16 by 9 ratio. So all I have to do is just go here, and I'm going to go with 9.5. I think that's about right. Yeah. And there, it shrinks it down, and it leaves me a little bit of a border going around the edge. So I'll just close that. I'm going to leave it selected, and that's all you have to do in the design step. Now we're going to switch over to the toolpath side. And this is where all the work really gets done with trying to carve out a photograph. So first, we're going to check and set our material thickness, and it's already set. I have put that in already at just over 5/8 of an inch. Our XY datum is going to be the front left corner. Z0 is the material surface, and all the rest of this is fine, so I don't have to touch any of those settings. We are then going to go over to Photo VCarve, which is a feature that is in Aspire or Vectric VCarve as well. There's, depending on the membership you have, it will be offered to you. And so we're going to click on that. All right, so here our start depth is going to be at 0, which is the surface of the board. And this is the key number that you really have to worry about, is the max carving depth. And I currently have it set at 0.04. And I played around with a multitude of settings on it. And if you go slightly lighter than this or smaller than this, like 0.025 or 0.03, it doesn't fully carve out the details of the picture, so it's too light. If you go any heavier than 0.04, it starts to make really deep grooves in the picture itself, and it gets very like corduroy looking. It's not a great setting. And you really start to see lines going across on it, and it's not good looking. So again, after playing around for this particular pictures that I'm using, 0.04 happened to work the best. Step over retract is just how high the machine will retract itself in the next row. I like to keep that pretty tight. It helps to cut down on machining time. For the tool, we'll be using a 60-degree V-bit. That is the best. If you use a 90-degree, the grooves will be too broad, they'll be too wide. And again, you'll lose detail and it will be too dark looking, let's call it. So 60-degree V-bit is the optimal tool for this type of machining. I'm also going to be doing it in a raster pattern. The line spacing will be dense. You want them very tight together for high detail. If you set it to sparse, it will space them out more and it will look really lined, and much more like a corduroy, where you'll have a very fluted looking picture. It's not very good. You want to keep it on dense. The line angle, I found that at 45 degrees is the optimal cutting for this. Anything lighter than that, or more towards 90 degrees, if you're going perfectly horizontal across, it doesn't come out right. It just doesn't, when it's cutting with the grain of the wood, it doesn't come out right, and it doesn't look good. 45 degrees just seemed to be the best, the most optimal setting for trying to carve out a photograph. Okay, so now that we've gone through all those settings, I'm going to hit calculate, and it will then play it for me. And there you can see it as it's carved it out. And it looks slightly different when you actually machine it. So don't get too nervous when you see it in this rendering. It will look better once you've gone ahead and done all the process on it to make it come out as a photograph. So I also want to point out that I'm going to close this out, and I'm going to go back temporarily to the design side. So I also want to point out that depending on the photograph you're using, another adjustment you can play around with, if you again are using Vectric, is they have a setting in here under editing objects. So once you have the photograph selected, you can open up the picture editor, and under the picture editor there are settings to play around with the contrast, the brightness, and the gamma. You can also invert the selection, or you can change it from a color photo to a black and white. And what I found is that high contrast photos work the best when trying to reproduce them on a carving on the machine. You don't want a lot of detail. So if you have a photo that has high detailed elements in it, it's not going to reproduce them. It just doesn't work out. The machine cannot reproduce that kind of detail. If it's overly bright as well, if you have too much, let's say, sunlight or something like that, that area is not going to come out. It's not going to pick it up. So you'd have to use these settings to play around and try to change the picture a bit so that the software can recognize it more and then reproduce it. So this is just something to also have as an extra tool to help you modify your photo so that it comes out the best when you're trying to carve it. So that's just something that I wanted to mention as well. It's important later on when you're trying to machine it. Okay. So now that I've gone ahead and we've created a toolpath, we're just going to go ahead and you can save that. And once you've saved it, then it's ready to go when you're ready to go ahead and machine it. All right, so I've already gone ahead and done that. The process is the same for any of the pictures that you're trying to use. I have 3 myself in this video that I'll be showing you. This just happens to be one of them, but the process is the same for all of them. And with that, I will now take you over to the machine and actually show you the setup and how it is machined on the CNC router. Okay, so I'm just about ready to start machining the first photograph. This is actually the back side of the board that I'm using, but I want to use it as an example. And this next tip is crucial to getting success in an actual picture photograph to come out correctly on the wood. And what that is it is critical that your hybrid table or your deck that you're working with has been surfaced, and it has to be perfectly flat to the machine. And then you also want to go ahead and surface the board that you're using, because you want to make sure that everything is absolutely dead flat to the machine. The cutting depths are so minute for creating a photograph that if the board is ever so slightly off because you didn't surface it, it will not register the correct depth for what the cut is that it needs to, and it will not recreate the photograph, the picture correctly, and it won't come out right. So I cannot stress highly enough that before you go ahead and start cutting, you must make sure that your table and your board that you're working on have been surfaced and are perfectly flat to the machine. I use an 1.25 inch surfacing bit, as you can see here, to do all of that. And I've also gone ahead and I cut a groove all the way around. Let me see if I can bring you in on this. I've cut a groove around the edge, a slot, so that the clamps will tie into there and I don't have anything on the surface of the board to get in the way. I've done that around all 4 sides. I did that on the table saw, and it's just a really easy way to grab the board without interfering with it. Okay, so now that we've done that, let's go ahead and start machining it. All right, so I just finished carving the photographs onto the boards. I've just taken them off the machine, and I wanted to show you what they look like right off of the machine. And I hope the camera can capture it. It's a lot of 45-degree diagonal lines, that are etched, carved into the board. And for this next step, I'll even show you the other one. So for this next step, before we seal the boards, they have to be sealed before we go any further, is I'm going to go over them with, I have these nylon brushes. They come in different grits. I have a 400 grit, a 600 grit, and I even have a 320. And you want to go along the same direction as the cut, so on the same diagonal 45 degree, to just clean up any of the little fuzzies that might still be in the grain from the cut. That's all we're trying to remove, is just the little furry kind of stuff. And you're not, going crazy trying to change the look of it or anything. It's just a little quick pass to try to clean up some of that stuff. And then I will seal it. I'm going to spray them with a de-waxed shellac. And I have to stress, it's de-waxed shellac. It's a sealer. And the reason I like using it is because anything will stick to it, and it dries really fast. It dries in less than an hour, and you can start top coating it. So So okay, let me go ahead and show you how I go about nylon brushing this. Okay, so I'm all done with the nylon brush. I vacuumed it, and now it's time to spray the sealer on it, which is again the de-wax shellac. And the importance of this, the reason for it, is that once I've sealed it, the next step is to spray about 2 coats of black spray paint on it. And if you didn't seal it, the black would soak into the pores of the wood. And when you go to sand it afterward, because you have to sand off some of that black paint, you'll get bleeding into areas that you don't want to have black in them. So the sealer helps to contain where the black goes, and it's a really important step. All right, so let me go ahead and show you how I put that on. It only needs 1 good coat of sealer. Okay. It doesn't change much either once you've sprayed it. The details pretty much stay the same. All right, so I'm gonna let that dry for about an hour, and then I can come back and start applying the black spray paint. Okay, so it's been an hour. The sealer has dried, and I am now ready to apply the black spray paint. I just happen to be using Krylon black lacquer. It dries fast, and again, it will stick to the de-wax shellac that I used as the sealer. I haven't done anything to the sealer, so I haven't sanded it or anything. You don't want to blow through it, so again, just as it is, as it dried, and I'm just going to apply 2 coats of the black on it. They'll be, you know, half an hour apart between each coat, and again, I'll do nothing in between. This is lacquer, you don't have to sand it. They melt into each other, so no sanding needed. You want to make sure that you get it into those grooves. Some of them are pretty deep, so you want to make sure it goes all the way in. And I'm just checking that, making sure. I like to spray it in 2 directions. Okay, and that's it. So again, I will follow this up with another coat in about a half an hour. And then once that's dried, we'll go on to the last step, which is the sanding. Okay, so the black paint has dried, and now it's time to sand off certain areas of it. This is where it gets a little bit artistic in that you want to study the picture and know what areas are supposed to be light and what areas are supposed to be dark, and not to try to sand past that, because otherwise you'll remove the grooves in the black paint and you'll be back at square one, and you know that's not going to look good. So this is where it takes, you know, you go slow and you just try to see when the picture starts to reveal itself, and then that's enough, and you stop there as you're going through the sanding. So I've got, to start with, I've got an 80 grit, which it's an old 80 grit, so it's a little smoother, and I'll progressively go up in grit as I see that it's getting closer to where I need to stop so that I don't sand too deep. All right, so let me give this a shot. All right, well, I'm pretty pleased with how these turned out. I really wasn't sure how the machine would be able to reproduce a picture like this, and a landscape that is. I know I had seen other videos where people have done portraits and they came out really well, but a face is really up close and very detailed, so it's kind of easier for the machine to reproduce it. The landscapes are a little more detailed, and with the light and the dark areas, I thought it would be a challenge. So these really turned out well. Again, beyond what I thought that the machine would be able to do. And it truly opened up like a new avenue for me of something to explore and play around with and see just how far I can go with it and really get it to, I don't want to say look realistic, but, get it to look really cool, where I think they already are there. With this, I would say just be careful how you pick the wood grain. You don't want any crazy curly grain that's going to interfere with the picture itself, because it'll take over the look, so to speak. For all of these that I did, I tried to pick mainly straight grain maple, and it just is a muted back surface that it doesn't interfere with the painting, so to speak, and it doesn't. You don't see the waves of the grain and so on and so forth, like a tiger striping. And that's really important. You don't want that in the background. So as long as you do that, and again, playing with the depth of how much you cut it and the contrast, light and the darks, pick the picture really well. Don't pick something too detailed. I think you'll have a good shot at trying to reproduce this. So, but yeah, that's gonna end it on this one. And I hope you guys enjoyed it. If you do enjoy my content, please be sure to hit the like and subscribe button. It really helps out the channel. And until then, I'll see you on the next one.